Well, as Danielle pointed out, I'm a blogger. Now, you may ask what that means. It means that for the last 5.5 years writing a daily blog, I've written about 450,000 words on strategy, creativity, innovation, and social media. It means my cat, my director of enthusiasm, helps me a lot in terms of inspiration. But being a blogger means three other things as well. One, about inspiration, it means you can find inspiration anywhere because you've got a daily deadline. You've got to find ideas wherever you can find them. Secondly, it means you're looking for communities that might be interested in what you have to say, or communities where you can find things that they're discussing that are interesting and you can talk about those. Third, it means that you become very familiar with letting the audience direct where the conversation goes. If you've ever looked at a blog before, it has those hyperlinks, and if a reader wants to go deeper in a subject, they can, or if they want to skip an article, they can go someplace else. And it's that third factor that's very important tonight as we talk about diversity and ideas in a porous community. Because at a couple of different junctures tonight, you all get to pick what stories we're going to cover. There's actually 9 versions of this presentation, and it will be your input that will direct it. So a lot of times speakers will come up and say, well, you have a really important role, and that's sort of BS, and you really don't have an important role as an audience. Tonight, you have an important role. If I don't hear the applause from you as you get the options, we'll just be dead in the water with the presentation, and the 18 minutes will go by very quickly. So I'll look for you at those points and point it out, and hopefully you'll help direct where we go. This idea of diversity and ideas in a porous community ties right back to this theme of how do you enrich a community. And if you think about community and the word common in there, you look it up in the dictionary, it says common people, common location, common ideas, and that's important to hold people together. But what we find in our work is it's about diversity and porous in terms of bringing ideas in that really sets the stage for enriching that community. There's a quote from Business Week a couple of years ago that has really shaped a lot of our thinking, and this idea that preparing for an uncertain future means you've got to leave doors open, you've got to be able to brainstorm possibilities, you've got to be able to consider a lot of things at one time. Now that sounds a lot easier to do than it really is. When you actually have to do that and consider all those possibilities, there's a lot of creative tension that goes along with that. So diversity and creative tension, how do you navigate your way through that? And this is your first opportunity to shape what we're going to talk about. So there's 3 ways we can go with this. We can talk about how polar thinkers combust relative to that topic. We can talk about when all of these are just alike. Or we can talk about oddballs pack a punch. Now I will tell you, this is a little bit like a game show. Some prizes are better than others. Be careful at door number 2, you know, what might be behind there. Who'd like to hear about polar thinkers combust? Not very many people. How about when all of these are just alike? Yeah. How about oddballs pack a punch? You all picked the winner. So let's go to when oddballs pack a punch. This story about diversity starts at a very young age for me, back in my neighborhood in Hays, Kansas, which quite frankly, despite the fact that you see a variety of Halloween costumes there, including one cross-dresser, I think, the young woman down in the front, there wasn't all that much diversity there. But I was Fred Flintstone back there in the back row, and around this time, I got my first bike, which I thought was pretty cool, and it now sort of opened up the neighborhood. I could go to the far end of the neighborhood and see the kids there and see what was going on. Around that same time, my parents taught me the Lord's Prayer. You know, again, a natural thing as you're growing up. So Bo Miller, who was in the back, right in the middle, liked my bike. And he came up to me one night and was like, well, can I ride your bike? And I thought, well, yeah, Bo, but first, as you can tell, I was sort of a teacher, you know, tried to educate people early on. It was like, how about learning the Lord's Prayer? And then you can ride my bike. And by gosh, Bo learned the Lord's Prayer, and Bo got to ride my bike, and I thought everything was great. It was only later I learned that the Millers who lived down the street were the only Jewish family in the neighborhood. And I realized that how you handle diversity and that creative tension can cause you a black eye if you really don't sort of play it right. That pattern seemed to go on as I grew up, where I had, as I called them, sort of oddball friends, in that they came from very different perspectives and had very different ideas. And typically, the only two things they had in common was, one, they were my friend, and two, they loved to fight with each other because none of them agreed about the same kind of thing. So what was mildly amusing growing up became a little bit problematic when I got into the workforce. And I started being responsible for a department and building a team because, quite frankly, I sort of gravitated to these strong personalities to a great extent, and they didn't work well together. In fact, I wound up spending more time sort of cleaning up their messes and the problems that they had in other places, even though I thought they were great contributors, than we actually got to spend doing things and moving things ahead. Because of that, I realized, okay, if I want to still keep this idea of diversity, but still be successful, there's some things we're going to have to change. And it was at that time, started looking at a variety of techniques that I had learned along the way, from big-time consulting to creative thinking techniques to, quite frankly, improv comedy and how that works in terms of flexibility, even to reality TV shows where you sort of take somebody and help them, and started to put all these things together into a way that people who thought very differently could now start to work together more successfully, or if you had a group that tended to be a little bit more the same, you could now start to push them to think about things in different ways. And it actually started to work. We were using it in a business community setting with 10, 15 people, and they could work together. Now, that's not to say it always worked. One time we had a session going, and one of my more curmudgeon-y coworkers walked in, looked at people playing with toys and talking back and forth and loud, and actually looking like they were enjoying work, which heaven forbid that anyone would look like they were enjoying work. And he looked at me and said, "I have real work to do." It's like, okay, you know what? If you went and did your real work, we'd probably all be better off. So it wasn't always a success, but for the large part, it started to work. But it was fairly small scale, and it was only in the last couple of years I saw an opportunity for how could we take this out to a bigger community. And it started not that far from here, actually at a T-Bones baseball game. The Social Media Club of Kansas City was hosting an event for some of the officials from Kansas City who'd been involved in bringing Google Fiber or winning Google Fiber from among 1,100 communities to talk about what that meant for the city. And you can imagine Social Media Club, there was a lot of interest, asking questions, and finally the officials said, you know what, this didn't come with an instruction manual from Google. There's nothing here that says what this is going to be. Quite frankly, we're looking to organizations like Social Media Club to tell us what will Kansas City look like with this capability. When I heard that statement, it only took me about 45 seconds to compose this tweet and send it off to Joe Cox, who was the head of Social Media Club at the time, to say, you know what, we're in for this. We can help take a look at this and what this can mean for Kansas City. So working with Social Media Club, we put together this event for 90 people at the Kansas City Library from all different parts of the community to look at what could Google Fiber, what could ultra-high-speed internet mean for Kansas City and how we live, how we learn, the entertainment, the arts, all types of dimensions for the city. And before that, we even had hundreds of people in an online survey come together and share these ideas. Talk about diversity. We had people from multiple countries submitting ideas and imagining what could Kansas City be. So in the course of the day, we were able to take this diversity, this newly formed community from among the community, and put together a report with hundreds of ideas and concepts about what Kansas City could be in the future. And just as we had crowdsourced the input to it, we crowdsourced this output as well, sort of an interim step in that it was a platform for other ideas, but we made it available. And we've had people from about 30 states and 30 countries download this imagination about what Kansas City could be. And when you think about that, there was a lot of interesting twists and turns. One thing we did after this was a global telepresence with leaders from around the world talking about gigabit speeds and ultra-high-speed internet and how it would allow information to go from your desktop out into the internet where you could access it anywhere. And Joseph Piquet, who's one of the participants, asked this question, that when everything is in the cloud, what does place mean? And I've thought about that question so much since then because it really starts to change so much when you've got this capability. If all your information can be accessible anywhere and you've got the capability to deliver a lot of content, a lot of information very quickly and very robustly, a lot of things start to change. When you think about what place does, I mean, we all are from someplace. We reside someplace. People meet, they congregate in places. Functions get carried out, all these things. And if you think about it, if the way we store and process information starts to change for these, there's probably no one in this room, no one watching here, whose life doesn't start to change as place becomes irrelevant or looks very different structurally than we've thought about it in the past. And that idea of place and community underscored a lot of ideas that came out of building the Gigabit City, and it got us thinking about porous communities. And basically, as we talk about enriching a community, what a porous community means is it has holes in it. That's what porous means. So information can come in and out, and it can be shared and thought about in new ways. So we've got three possibilities to talk about ideas in porous communities. We can talk about you and your great-great-great-great-great. We could talk about unwasting the college opportunity, or we could talk about a talent agency for brainiacs. So who'd like to talk about you and your great-great-great-great-great? It's a really good story. Who'd like to talk about, there may be a hanging chat or a recount later. We're in election day, so who'd like to talk about unwasting the college opportunity? Yeah. How about a talent agency for brainiacs? There's a strong support for that. The last votes came in. I guess we're going to talk about a talent agency for brainiacs. On the left is one of the first universities that we still know of. I think it was from about 500 BC, so about 2,500 years ago. On the right is dear old Kansas City, Kansas Community College, where we are today. If you think about education and place, doesn't look too much different, does it? Sort of structurally, and even the color scheme looks pretty comparable between the two. That's not a bad thing, but in terms of place, education probably hasn't changed a lot over time. Now we're seeing some online education. There's some movement there. But one of the intriguing ideas that came out of building the Gigabit City was, instead of looking at education as we have, where it's sort of who are the teachers at this institution and what are the educational resources here, this fast internet capability, this high bandwidth and ability to deliver information can open up a different model. And one of the ideas really said, look at education instead of live performance as people come together and learn right there, to more of a movie production or a talent agency type of approach, where it's not so much the teachers that are right there, but teachers around the world and information sources around the world that a university, a college is bringing together to create specific productions, much as you would a movie. That may be a specific class. It may be a degree program. It may be a college within a university. But in the future, it could be much less about, I went here for a certain time and took a certain set of courses. And brands really take advantage, universities take advantage of this branding idea that there's affiliation and you can pull in talent and resources from around the world. Big idea. Will it happen like that? I don't know, but it's a platform and a thought about how can you make a university more porous and increase the diversity of thought. So those was one idea. Some of the other ones were equally big in terms of what a porous community is. Maybe they'll happen, maybe they won't, maybe they'll morph. But what can you take away here tonight as you've been a community and formed this? What can you do to make you be a more porous you? Because a porous community is filled up with porous yous, porous people who can take in more ideas. We've got two examples that you can walk away with. One is from a place a long time ago. This is Athens, and Paul of Tarsus, who was coming to evangelize and talk to the Athenians about his view of spirituality. Now, a lot of times we walk into a new situation and, he might look at this and go, you Greeks have got this all wrong. You've got all these gods, you're afraid of them, they're scary, they're thunder, they're on mountains, they're doing all this stuff. You guys don't get it. Let me tell you what I want to do. Chances are the reception would not have been that strong for Paul of Tarsus at the time. Instead, he walked around the place of Tarsus and found this holy place devoted to the unknown God. And as he talked to them, he said, I've come to talk to you about that God that you've already recognized. Think about how powerful that is in the communities we're in, where we have a new idea or a new community's forming, and it's just human nature. I want to share what I want to do. I want to share what I want to do. But step back. listen, observe, and think about this new community, and where are people coming from, where are their places, and how can you start to talk to them and frame ideas in a way that's meaningful for them. So that's the first thing you can walk out of here today and start to do. The second story about place is from a more near place. This is my neighborhood right now, where we have a lot of squirrels in our neighborhood who love to eat pumpkins, quite frankly, among other things. They also eat bird food as well out of our bird feeder. But a couple years ago, we had some beautiful pumpkins. We'd carved one, had another gorgeous one. I said, well, you know what? We've got a lot of squirrels here. I'm just going to let the squirrels see what they can carve out of this pumpkin. They probably read the blog. It'll be great. So I put this beautiful pumpkin out. I mean, they're following me. They know about creativity. Put it out there. They started in on it. A couple of days later, we were leaving the house, and I looked down and was like, oh my gosh, look at this pumpkin. I have the most uncreative squirrels in the world. They've destroyed this thing. That isn't a pumpkin. There's no face. There's no design there. This is crazy. But it is a potential blog post. So, you know, as I said, you're always looking for a new topic. So I came back that afternoon, took some pictures of it, and as I moved it around, I realized something, and that was when I didn't look at the pumpkin as I looked at it, but looked at it from their perspective, and the stem became the nose, all of a sudden there was a face in the pumpkin. Do you see it? Let me really draw it in here. Yeah, the Scream, which sold for $120 million a couple of years ago, I suddenly realized I had some pretty smart and creative squirrels. But I think we probably all face that as well. We're in a community with people. We may view ourselves as the expert, as really smart, but we may walk right past million-dollar ideas that other people have because we don't share their perspective. So I think that's the important thing here as well, to not just take your viewpoint, but think about how other people look at things. Start with their perspective and try and understand how they're seeing things. Not only might you find some million-dollar ideas, it could save you some black eyes in handling diversity as well over time. So with those ideas, I encourage you to walk out of here tonight and go be a more porous you. Thank you very much.